Okay, gentlemen, as you know, I've been working on taking Charles Totten's Strategos, the American Way of War, which is a Kriegspiel variant adopted army-wide in the late 1880 to early 1881 time frame. Totten himself had two variants in the rules. The first is a basic game, which is really more of a type of battle chess compared to Kriegspiel. And then the advanced game is the actual Kriegspiel stuff that allegedly led to Arneson and Wesley coming up with Strategos A, Ancients, and Strategos N, Napoleonics, as well as the advanced mechanic for resolving melee with table S or table T, and then the way of rolling the dice and choosing whether or not to continue rolling if you've got higher odds against your opponent. That appears in Don't Give Up the Ship, which was a joint production of, I believe, Arneson and Gygax for Napoleonic naval rules. And a massive Napoleonic war game was run using Don't Give Up the Ship and Strategos N. Anyway, to backtrack, so I started translating Totten, and I figured there were some concepts in the basic game because it appears first, as well as definitions and his way of writing and approaching problems. So I chose to deconstruct the basic game, and I've become more and more enamored with it. The advanced game, incidentally, had a war game that was tested out at West Point in February of one of the years, and I can't remember when. But anyway, the participants in that war game, and there were multiple umpires, there were assistants, there were commanders on the red side and the blue side. As it turns out, if you delve into it, what you find is that this is actually the crossing of the Chattahoochee River, which was the last major Confederate line of defense prior to Atlanta, other than Peachtree Creek. The Confederate side was led by Joe Johnston, Fighting Joe, and then on the Union side, that was led by, of course, Sherman. If you look at the example that's given, they actually start with a campaign game, and then they drill down, because that was one of the reasons that Totten's war game won out over a competitor, one of many reasons, but one of them was the fact that you could scale it up and scale it all the way down to squad level actions. And he demonstrated that by running a campaign game, which started out as a major map campaign, and then they boiled it down to a battle map. Now, what I've done for the basic game is I've pared that down even more. So not only is this a subset of the crossing of the Chattahoochee, this is really not even a division versus division level fight. Let me orient you to the battlefield. So this is a portion of the Chattahoochee, which is southeast of Vinings, Georgia, and Roswell, if you can see my pointer. Roswell this is the east side of the map. So Roswell, Georgia is off in this direction, which was scouted by Girard's cavalry on the Union side. The Union is approaching from this side. This is the north. Confederates are defending over here in the south. Opposing Girard's cavalry all the way up from the Battle of Marietta was a cavalry corps, Wheeler's cavalry corps. And there isn't a lot of clarity about what happened on this sector of the battlefield other than it was lightly defended by the Confederates. My assumption, based on all the reading that I've been able to cobble together, is that this was just a very small portion of Wheeler's force. Sherman had actually, way back in April, before he even kicked off the Atlanta campaign, he had telegraphed or written to General Halleck and said that, hey, Joe Johnston, I'm going to fake this guy out. I'm going to end up going around him. I'm going to end up flanking him on the left when I cross the Chattahoochee. And sure enough, here it is in July 8th specifically, July 8th, 1864. And over the course of the Atlanta campaign, Johnston has been getting flanked again and again and again by Sherman going to Sherman's right. And so he keeps hitting him on Johnston's left, Sherman's right. Does that over and over and over again. But here at the Chattahoochee, he does completely opposite. Sherman actually does push a lot of cavalry units way down to Campbellton, Georgia, and does demonstrations down there and everything else to get Johnston to believe that his cavalry, that the flanking action is going to take place all the way down to the southwest, probably around Campbellton or somewhere down there, when in fact it happens up here in the Roswell area, a little bit west of Roswell. So upstream is up here by Roswell. Downstream is down there in the lower left-hand corner. Again, this is south over to the left, north over to the right. So north, south, east, west. The basic game doesn't have any provisions for deployment or anything else like that. It does have an interesting break where there is an original set of initial moves called the skirmishing game, where your movements are limited until you get like 5 units in contact, and then it switches to the general engagement phase where things get changed up. And it is a kind of very complex battle chess. I have ordered some interesting minis from a company that produces these plexiglass minis, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they'll look on the table. I've got more than enough to handle this engagement, particularly because I've chopped it down so much. So Cox's division over here, which is part of Schofield's 23rd Corps, Cox's division comes in, Cox's 3rd Division comes in first to make this crossing. Schofield has been ordered to make a crossing here in the environs of Soap Creek because of what the cavalry scouts have kind of indicated, that really the Confederates they've moved most of their cavalry off. They've got some artillery and some skirmishers out here. So it seems like the whole area is lightly defended. Now I'm going to make it a little bit more difficult for the Union forces by giving the Confederates more than just some skirmishers and a couple artillery pieces. But anyway, Cox's 3rd Division of the 23rd Corps is going to come in first and make the crossing. And then behind him is Halleck's 2nd Division. So Schofield was being very conservative, right? If Cox didn't get the job done, then Halleck with the 2nd definitely would. There was no 1st Division. 1st Division had been disbanded and kind of broken up amongst the 2nd and 3rd Division in this particular corps. Anyway, let's talk about the map itself. So up here at this extreme corner, there is a crossing point that is not a bridge, but there was a ferry here. This was called Johnston's, not Johnston, but Johnston's ferry. Then down here was the Soap Creek, where it emptied into the Chattahoochee. The major river here is the Chattahoochee. Like I said, it flows from up here in the east down there to the southwest. Soap Creek actually goes up to this mill works up here. There were some mills that were burned down by the Union forces. Again, this goes back to Sherman's orders, which was to also destroy the Confederate war machine, disable them economically. Over here, further to the east in Roswell, there's another mill where a bunch of women are going to be captured and carted off as basically traitors to the Union, prisoners of war, and taken up eventually to first to Nashville, then to Louisville, and then eventually they get released, and some of them actually start a textile mill up there. But anyway, that's off map here. It will be on the larger map that we do. How are we doing on time? 8 minutes, okay. So Chattahoochee River coming down here, the Soap Creek. This was actually a fordable location. There had been heavy rains a couple weeks before, but it turns out at this time, the Chattahoochee is not overflowing its banks, and it is fordable. The river bridge at Roswell had already been burned by the Confederate forces when they retreated. Coming further down here, downriver, there is a set of small islands in the middle of this bend in the Chattahoochee, which is where Powers Ferry was located. And then further down here is Pace's Ferry, where an engagement had actually taken place on July 5th between a different corps and a different element of the Confederate Army as well. The Confederates had built a very strong set of fortifications using slave labor and wounded Confederates, and had been constructing this since early June. Well, actually late June. I think Shoup, the Confederate engineer who proposed it back before the Kennesaw Mountain engagement, that was like July 19th. He proposed it, and here it is. By July 4th and 5th, I think it is, the Confederates take up their positions in this massive set of fortifications, probably the best set of military fortifications that have been created on the North American continent ever. You can look it up. It's called the River Line. Anyway, that's further down here to the south, southeast, so it doesn't come into play here. Just be aware that this is an area where Schofield was supposed to operate. Girard is, again, further up here to the east with the Roswell area. And then down here, we've got Wheeler's elements. And I am going to go ahead and have deployments done along the roads. So again, I'm adding to the basic game so that it's much more like a real war game. So deployments for the Confederates, they can come in on any of these 3 roads. They can begin with their units stacked, so they can bring in 2 units of infantry, 2 stands of infantry at a time. And then same thing for the Union. They begin on the road stacked up and have to deploy south. I've made this engagement area because this actually leads down to that massive Confederate fortification, and this area was not completely under Union control at this point. It's pretty solidly under Union control, but just to keep it interesting, I am making this a joint kind of deployment area. So if the Union gets a foothold on this side, I'm going to allow the Confederate troops to come in, and then if there are Union troops in the way here, I'm going to have them do a roll-off, and if whoever wins the roll-off gets to come on, and the loser has to move back like 3 inches. Okay, more orientation to the map. What else have we not pointed out here? Oh yeah, so this is a small farm called Dixon. There are 2 Dixons on the map itself. This is a church and potentially a graveyard. This is a church with a graveyard. It just helped me kind of lay out the road network. So both sides get 3, and then a contested road, Chattahoochee River, Soap Creek, which is important. The other creeks and the other minor pass and roads are not important at all to me. The scale is 1 inch equals 150 yards. The troops, when I get these plexiglass troops, it's actually going to be 1 to 40 ratios, so that the frontage is right with this 1 inch equals 150 yards kind of frontage. I did a lot of math and made sure that I'm right, and I think I am. I've actually gone to the extent of actually identifying specific units and specific unit commanders that would have been in this hypothetical engagement. I mean, some of them were actually there, but the rest of the pieces I put together based on my best ability to reconstruct what would be a credible Confederate defense here. There is a line of low hills here, and the Confederates did put in some entrenchments up here that were capable of covering Soap Creek, as well as all the way down here to Powers Ferry. So I'm going to go ahead and give them those 2 fortifications, which field fortifications in the basic set gives you basically artillery fire coverage out to 3 inches. So they're going to be covering quite a radius here, making it harder for the Union to make its crossing. The pontoons, there are no bridging rules. There is a set of appendices in the advanced game that actually give the ability to do like bridging and stuff. So I'm going to give the Union side some pontoon boats with their engineers, and then on the Confederate side, I'm going to give them engineers so that they can add additional entrenchments if they want to. In both cases, it's going to cost them baggage. Under the basic rules, you have 24 pieces of baggage. If you lose all of your baggage, you lose the game. Same thing with the basic game with standards. There's 1 standard per brigade, and I'm going to give both of them 2 standards. If you lose a majority of your standards, that is also a way to lose the game. So if either of these guys happen to have a unit with a standard that gets captured or killed, not displaced, but actually killed by fire, which there are only a certain number of ways you can accomplish that. You can only accomplish that with artillery and with infantry crossfire in the basic game. So it'll be interesting to see, because you have to have those standards up with your front line or within a couple inches of it. Otherwise, you forfeit points to the other side. That's the other thing that's very innovative about Totten's basic game, is that it uses a very pip-like or command point system. Both sides start with, both sides get a counter each time you have turns. And if you don't use all the command points, they get forfeit to the other team. You keep some command points with your reserve. There are these forfeitures for certain conditions that go back and forth. And you basically spend your command points for everything you want to do. If you want to move, if you want to capture an enemy piece, if you want to engage the enemy pieces, anything you want to do, it costs command points. And so part of the game is denying the enemy command points, by making sure you don't do any forfeitures. But the other part of it is making sure that you do your own management of those command points so that you don't end up in a bad situation. Because if you have a debt to the enemy, up to half your command points can be lost paying that debt as it goes back and forth. So I'm going to have a slate that kind of keeps track of this command point back and forth. Again, this whole game is super, super interesting to me. So I'm really looking forward to playing. My next step here is to kind of like feel out where the positions of the troops. I'm going to play through a game using blocks and the little movement trays I ginned up for the chainmail game on this battlefield. And then, as you guys know, I've ordered a overlay of the map on basically a marketing flag material, which should be, I had them do like an olive green backing, plus it'll lay on this felt. So I'm hoping that it's transparent enough that some of that green seeps through, and then I'll lay the river over top of it. And I'm hoping that it'll lay out the topo features, and then we'll have something like this with like the real topo and the map kind of draped over it properly. I'm hoping it all lays out very nice like that. We'll see. But in the meantime, I'm going to play the prototype game now to get some of the bugs out, and I might actually record this. That's what I'm up to. Hope you guys are having fun. I know you're playing Chainmail tomorrow, Purple Druid and Captain Hook.